the Yo Disabled and Proud Leadership Speaker Series. We're super excited that you're all here, and we're going to wait a minute for some more people to jump on, and then I will do a little accessibility introduction, and then we will move forward with the webinar. So hang tight for a sec, and we will wait for a few more people to join. Hi again. I'm gonna jump in. We are very excited to welcome you to the Yo Disabled and Proud Speaker Series. We are interviewing Denna Lambert today, and we are super excited to get started. I'll wait another couple minutes for people to jump in, and then go over some accessibility stuff. Okay, it is 9:02, so I think we can get going as more people jump on. Welcome to the Yo Disabled and Proud Speaker Series. I want to first introduce a couple of accessibility things. We want to introduce captioning. You can either access captioning in the link that was just sent in the text or in the chat. You can access it through that, which will take you to a separate screen, or you can do it right here on Zoom by clicking the captioning button on the bottom display. And in addition to that, the chat is open to just hosts and panelists. So you can comment in the chat if you have any accessibility needs or technical questions that we can answer for you. And then feel free as the event goes on to ask your questions in the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen for Denna as the interview goes. And we are super excited to be answering those questions. So bounce them into the Q&A button, and we will get to some of those at the end. And if you are unable to type it into the chat, feel free to use the raise hand button if that is more accessible. But otherwise, please type them into the chat and we will answer them that way. And in terms of introductions, my name is Tatum Tricarico, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a white woman with long brown hair, and I have brown glasses and my red Yo Disabled and Proud shirt. And I am in front of my desk, and it's a white desk with some stuff on top of it, including a very large disability pride flag on the wall that has several different zigzag colored lines and a black background. And so we are super excited to get started. So I will jump it over to Evan, and I will be back for the Q&A.
Thank you, Cam. I'm Evan Milburn. He, him, his are my pronouns. I'm a blonde-haired, blue-eyed male. I have APERT syndrome, APERT syndrome. But I'm going to talk to you tonight about. I'll be one of your interviewers. And I'll also be telling you a little about the speaker series. So we have monthly installments of these speaker series, where we invite disability activists to speak out about the advocacy of the community, how you can get involved. Some past speakers have been Alice Wong, Nina Kane, Rebecca Coakley, and we had Julie Heeman last month. And we are so excited to have Denna Lambert this month. So, but before we begin, I want to take a special minute to thank some amazing people, both on screen and behind the scenes with us. Our amazing mentors from CFLC, for sharing their wisdom, their expertise, and assisting us in this event, and putting on this event. Obviously, our guest, Denna Lambert, for taking time out of her busy day to come tell us more about her life as an advocate. her work at NASA and what inspires her and how she helped carry out her message. And finally, the amazing captioners for providing access needs to all you guys. And I will pass it over to my good friend Tammy to introduce herself and introduce Deanna.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cami Marble. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a white woman with long brown hair that's pulled half back. I'm wearing the red Yo Disabled and Proud shirt, and I'm wearing blue rimmed round glasses. And behind me, I have the Yo Disabled and Proud background, which is blue and has the Yo Disabled and Proud logo, as well as a photo of Dina. I am so thankful to get the privilege to introduce Dina, our speaker today. She is a project manager with the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. Her day-to-day duties include planning, researching, and executing outreach opportunities for the science community, including interdepartmental research, partnerships with student researchers at universities, and citizen science activities. She is currently working with the NASA headquarters in conducting site reviews of museums and institutions that receive funding from NASA, and she has been with NASA for 17 years. You can follow her on Twitter at Denna Lambert01 and on Instagram at Denna.Lambert. I'm so privileged to welcome Dina to the screen to introduce herself and provide her image descriptions as we get started with this interview.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I am a Black woman with locks that are braids. Some people call them braids, but I call them locks that are shoulder length. I am wearing a peach colored shirt, and I'm sitting in my hopefully clean living room. I think it's clean last time I checked, but I have a toddler, so it probably has lots of toys and children's books in the background. And I definitely would like one of those Yo Disabled shirts. So I'll be talking to you guys afterwards.
Yes, I'm sure we can make that happen.
We'll definitely make it happen. But first off, how are you doing during the pandemic? What have you been up to during these crazy world we're living in?
Oh my goodness. I think I probably, like so many of us, experiencing a bit of whiplash, especially in the last couple of, weeks. I think there's a meme that's been going around that it has on one side of the image what would be like your plans for the fall or the summer, and it looks like it's someone drinking martinis or at the beach or whatever, and then it says Delta variant, and it has kind of chaotic kind of scene, and I feel like that's kind of where we've been, or where I've been since March of 2020. We first had a thought of, okay, it's 2 weeks, or it's going to be a month, and we all thought that, okay, I got this, I can do this. But as reality kind of hit for all of us, especially disabled folks, many of the systems that we relied on for, whether it was assistance, receiving groceries, I mean, all of it kind of came to a screeching halt. And, things that had become very, simple for me, of ordering groceries online, was now much, much more complicated, because now I'm in an environment that I don't know anymore with social distancing. It's scary. It's, there's, you're afraid to touch anything, and no one is wanting to touch you. I would say after a while, I think I got a bit of a rhythm of things. I am a mom, and I've been able to work from home. My son has been able to go to daycare, and that's been pretty consistent. But there's just this undercurrent right now of what's next. And I think it's exhausting. And socially, knowing that we also have this thing in front of us of reckoning with our social justice and racial justice and equity, that's in our face every day. as well. So I think we are taking on more than what a human can handle, and living through it every day and trying to do the best that we can. I guess that's kind of where I am. I probably have more gray hair than I did at the start of March 2020. So
yeah, I definitely feel that. I remember March of 2020 being like, it's 2 weeks, it'll go back to normal. And I don't think we'll ever go back to this so-called normal, nor do I think we necessarily should go back to where we were before the pandemic.
Exactly. I think in some ways my world has become smaller, meaning that the neighbors that I maybe would not have interacted with before, things have shifted so that I do interact with them a lot more than what I would have. But it has also grown in that through, vehicles like, Zoom or Teams or some other thing, I've been able to attend so many more meetings or conferences that just would not have been practically possible for me, at my current stage of life.
Yeah, even becoming a part of this program was something that became possible to me because of Zoom and because of the pandemic. And otherwise, I don't think I would get the opportunity to interview you right now. So that's a cool thing that's come out of this pandemic. So this is kind of changing directions a little bit. You mentioned your work just a little bit, but what really launched you into your work at NASA, and what do you love about your work?
Oh my goodness. So I didn't necessarily take the traditional route to get to NASA. I like any, kid growing up in the 80s, I watched, Star Trek: The Next Generation, and I was definitely a fan of the character, Geordie LaForge, even though there were some elements that were definitely cringe-worthy when it comes to, what blindness is really like as a real blind person. But the sentiment that that this individual who has a disability could be a part of the command crew of a significantly large vessel that can explore and go, to unknown places was pretty exciting to me. And, so I had an interest in electrical engineering. I had an aptitude for, science. And even though my parents, they didn't understand, what, elements of chemistry or physics or whatever, they were very supportive in making sure that I had access to the people who I could ask all the different questions. So that's where I did get a chance to go through some engineering programs in high school and college. But I kind of hit a roadblock, and that I quickly realized that I was one of very few people, as a Black woman going into the field of electrical engineering in the South, the Deep South, and particularly as a blind woman, I faced a lot of, skepticism or doubts as to whether I could be a successful engineer. And unfortunately, I kind of let that get the better side of me. So I switched majors from engineering to business. But I still had an interest in working in a technical field. And actually, where I was introduced to NASA was at a conference with a gentleman named Alan Muir. He was the director of a program called the Center for Students with Disabilities that tried to connect students in career services centers with employers. And actually, NASA was there at one of their conferences, and I was a student speaker, and NASA was there, and they asked, "Hey, would you be willing to move out of Arkansas?" And I was like, "Well, yes, hell yes." Because at that point, I had gotten every flavor of rejection letter that you could get, because there weren't very many disabled people working in, rural parts of Arkansas. And we all know that discrimination happens in all different forms. So to start on with an agency that was willing to be bold and say, hey, are you willing to move? And I had to be able to say yes. So that's how I started. Originally as a contract specialist. The government that has all kinds of agreement. We think the government has lots of money. Sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. But with businesses, particularly small businesses, we set up contracts or agreements and grants. And so my first job with NASA was to establish those agreements based on our acquisition and procurement laws. So 17 years later, I work more closely with our science community and look at where some of our research and outreach opportunities can either create partnerships with other universities, whether it's historically Black colleges or universities or HSIs, and say, hey, we could really use some of the knowledge that's being grown out of these universities to promote and expand the work of NASA. So that's where I am right now.
So you talked a little bit about basically the previous answer, but what's your experience in STEM or science, technology, engineering, math as a Black disabled woman? How did intersectionality impact you?
So I think, so when I started, it was, oh my goodness, late 90s, 2000s. I think we were, if anyone is over the age of 35 would remember, like, IRC and bulletin board services and listservs. Very, by today's standards, very rudimentary. So I didn't know of any other blind person at the time out there doing the work. Now, as I've been working with NASA as an employee, even as a recruiter, there are so many more people with disabilities out there doing the work. AAAS and many others have been doing the hard work of reaching down into high schools and colleges and recruiting students and actually employing students in the STEM fields. So if I was sort of say to myself when I was a sophomore in a circuits class, and I had this professor, older white man, who was saying, how are you gonna, do a circuit design? I didn't have an answer back then. Now with technology, so many disabled people have come up with so many great solutions that I don't have to come up with those solutions all by myself. And that's where even true today, where if I have an accessibility issue of software, or I am, coding some type of algorithm to do a calculation for me, I now have a larger kind of tribe that can help me with different approaches or ideas of other people who are using the same type of assistive technology as me. I'm not always the first kind of ceiling breaker there is, because that work gets exhausting over time. So what I would say now is that accessibility has come a long way. We still have a lot of work to do with regard to digital accessibility. We have a lot of work to do with equity in, getting access to meetings where decisions are being made about software or hardware that's being purchased, or even how we're gonna, roll out programs. But at least there's more of us to raise those concerns.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I also am a disabled woman in STEM. I'm a computer science major and I'm hoping to go into medicine. So different fields, but still some overlap. And I think you started to touch on this about having people so that you're not always the first person having to figure out that accommodation or figure out how to make things accessible. But why do you think it's important for young disabled people to have role models in their fields? And going off of that, what advice would you give to disabled people going into STEM?
Oh my goodness. I would say, hey, if you have this innate desire to, whether it is to solve a problem or to be curious about a particular design, whether it's architecture or if it's biology or chemistry or medicine, I mean, go with that, because that desire is what is going to have to carry you through as you kind of face barrier upon barrier. And I don't want to paint like a bleak picture, but as we kind of tackle these, whether it's new challenges or accessibility problems or whatever, it is easy sometimes if you're just doing it by yourself to feel worn down, to feel discouraged. And I think having disabled mentors who are further along in their career, some that are just starting their career, helps in kind of utilizing their knowledge, because they've paved the way. Maybe not in the same way that you will as an individual, but having them be able to say, hey, you should talk to Professor Jones over here. She was really helpful when it came to advocating for an accommodation. Or another professor may have some funding that can help with purchasing equipment, or has a research opportunity that you can sign on to. Because ultimately, you're going to need allies and advocates along with you, particularly in the sciences. We know this as people of color in STEM fields. We know this as women, but it's particularly true as disabled people going into those fields. So you're going to need mentors at all different stages, because I would not turn down an opportunity if it's a good match to mentor or have a mentor, because there's just been so many doors opened up from mentoring relationships that I've had over the years that I didn't know was going to happen until, let's say, months or years down the line.
That's awesome. Obviously, our biggest mentors are usually our parents. And I just want to know, what was it like having a parent with the same similar disability as you? I believe it was a father that had the same congenital cataract diagnosis as you.
Yeah.
What that was like.
So blindness, it was something that was passed down through my family. So my dad, and I believe some of his siblings may have had congenital cataracts, but his was the most severe. So for him, I mean, he was growing up in a time as a Black man when, just even entering a building was, considered illegal or offensive. And so his experience with blindness was different, and his perception of the world is definitely different. So he, in growing up and hearing the stories that he had, he didn't have the opportunity to learn Braille or viewed using a cane or a mobility device as a positive thing. So what I would say is that our perception of disability, even though we lived in one house, is very different. And that's based on the lived experiences that we have. But he has given me so much strength to just seeing what he faced as a Black older man, navigating in a world that wasn't, built, with blindness in mind. It's given me so much strength to see that he continues to move forward, even though we have come to a different understanding about, like, for myself, I use a cane or a guide dog because hey, these tools help me move and get around. For him, I think those tools were seen as a strike against someone for employability. And I think that shift that you see between my dad and myself is due to the awesome work that our disabled leaders through the passage of the ADA, the Rehab Act, all the different state, laws that we have now that protect us as disabled people from discriminatory practices, or help ensure that we do have funding for rehabilitation services. That shift has come about because of a lot of the work that has been done nationally and even locally. But my dad is now 80 years old. He definitely he gives me that ability to have my own self-determination. And he doesn't know the word for that, having self-determination, but he honors that and respects that, hey, I am my own individual and I need to have my own journey into my experience and life as a blind woman.
Do you think that growing up with your father growing up with a disabled father impacted your own sense of disability pride?
I think so. That it's interesting because, I think my understanding of how the world views a blind woman has kind of evolved over time. So I know when I was maybe like 10, preteen age, I wanted to look as sighted as possible. So I didn't want to wear glasses. I didn't want to use large print. I wanted to be just like my peers, who my peers were non-disabled, kids. I attended public school. But as I started to see other role models out there, it gave me a chance to test out, what is it like asking for accommodations that could be helpful, like large print, like Braille, even seeing other people using service dogs or guide dogs. It gave me kind of that proving ground for me to be able to test out my own experience. So that's where it goes back to the importance of having disabled mentors, disabled role models of all different types of disabilities out there, because inevitably, and my friend Christina probably remembers this, we were at a National Council on Disability conference, and we were kind of hanging out in the lobby. And, we were trying to figure out, what are we going to do? Just, it was a bunch of us as young women, with all different types of disabilities, what are we going to do for fun? And I would have never thought in a million years, hey, let's go to a club. And all of us crammed into a cab. I think we had an access issue that night where a cab driver didn't want to take us. That was 20 years ago. So Christina has to jog my memory. But it was the idea that I did not need to be ashamed of who I was. I had a brand new guide dog. There was Rebecca, who's a little person. There was Christina in a wheelchair. And we were out there living our life as we were. And I think that helped to kind of shift my own identity as a disabled woman to say, hey, I don't have to kind of contort myself into someone I'm not. I can embrace who I am and embrace what my potential is. And where my potential is utilizing tools that would probably make me more visible as a blind person or a disabled person. So that, I think that happens to a lot of us. Our view of ourselves or understanding of disability changes over time. You don't have to kind of have this solid state of a view as a disabled person. It can change over time as you enter and exit different phases of life, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that does. That really resonates with me, especially talking about like just living your life surrounded by other disabled people is such a different experience than going out with your able-bodied friends. And it's just a different, like, it's hard to describe, but it's a different experience having people that get it and know what it's like.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Especially when you do come across those, unfortunate situations where you're gonna have an access issue. How do other people handle it? Some people, are very upfront and take it on. Some people are more kind of I don't want to say passive, but because passive can be a strong stance as well. But you can see all the different approaches that work for each individual for accomplishing of moving through life. And that's what's really important. There's not just one solution out there for everyone. There's many different types. And that's the cool thing about science is this and we've seen this kind of play out through the pandemic. Our understanding of this virus has evolved over time. Our conclusions have changed over time, and that's okay. Just as how we have multiple models of disability out there. Those models have changed and evolved over time because of the environment, because of legislation, because of access and technology too.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You talked a little bit about your experience having a disabled father and having disabled parents. What is it like growing up as the parent with a disability? And what has your experience been like as a single adoptive mother?
So that's where it's kind of like you feel pretty confident. So before I became a mom, I was pretty confident. I had a bucket list. I was like, dang it, I want to go travel the world. So I had the confidence out there to book a trip internationally and go and kind of be daring, just as any other 30 something person would want to do, which is awesome. And I know I'm coming from a place of privilege because we do know that people with disabilities in other countries don't have the same type of access that we do here. So I definitely want to acknowledge that, my desire and ability to travel is predicated on the privilege that I have here in this country. But knowing that, when I became a mom, to he's now 2, but when I first got him, I was scared to move around my house because what if I bump into something? What if I measure the medication wrong or whatever? And so there's this learning phase that every parent goes through, but especially as a blind person, I had to go through. Even now, sometimes I do become self-conscious of, how do I look as a blind mom chasing after, my 2-year-old? The answer is probably exhausted, just like everybody else. We're doing the best that we can with what we have. But sometimes I have to fall back on how my son sees me. And he is very proud that his mommy has a white cane and that we go out of the house with a white cane and a guide dog, at times. And that's normal for him. So I hope to kind of keep that level of an innocent perspective of, hey, this is our family. This is who we are. We're going to live our best life, however that looks. But also knowing that I need to pull in extra resources to help support me as a blind mom, because there are some realities of transportation. Sometimes I do need sighted assistance and knowing that I need to advocate for myself as a parent as well. So.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I know in my like disability circles, we've talked a lot about collective care and caring for each other as disabled people and just as humans in general, caring for each other.
Yes.
And I'm wondering how you've experienced that either as a disabled person, as a disabled parent, or, you know, as a person.
Oh my goodness. So during the pandemic, Conchita Hernandez and I think a couple of other folks, disabled folks in the DC area, created this kind of mutual care. It was like a Facebook group that, you know, whatever resources someone may need or extra resources someone may have, they posted that. And it was so cool to see the connections that were being made within the disabled community to ensure that we had what we needed, because the world had kind of turned upside down. One thing that has been really great, so it's like I live in almost, I don't want to say two different worlds. I have this world of needing and wanting support from other disabled people to be able to have the conversations that you can only have with disabled people, to say, are you feeling exhausted? You know, just getting out of bed, you know, are you, you know, how are you handling getting care assistance? You know, how are you doing that? But then also interacting and needing community with people without disabilities within my community, because the reality that we do know is that sometimes there's very few of us in our own neighborhoods, you know, that are, you know, blindness is still considered a low incidence disability. So within my community, there may be a handful of blind people surrounded by thousands of other sighted people. So that's where having the ability to connect and kind of bridge that gap between what life is like without a disability versus what is life like as a disabled woman has been really helpful. So in my community in Greenbelt, it's been nice to kind of be able to offer up resources and also receive resources in exchange. And it's like a form of care. And that's been awesome as well. So there's importance of having a disabled community that you can go to and also a non-disabled community. And hopefully, you know, the two will meet together as you go about living life, whether it's having, you know, getting engaged, you know, buying a home, you know, having a baby, you know, you want those communities to be able to merge together at some point.
That's really awesome. And I'm sure we can all agree, but even with disability community, at least from my experience, is a powerful thing, because we all genuinely have that collective care and need for one another. And I think that's a powerful thing. So if you were writing a letter to your younger self, what would you tell your younger self? What would you say to that younger Denna Lambert?
Oh my goodness. I think so I have been incredibly blessed to have had so many different opportunities to you know, experience, whether it is you know, traveling or whatever. But I think so much of the brain space that I had was taken up by fearing what other people thought, or worrying about what my parents would think. I know that we all, a lot of us in the disabled community, experience reactions of people that says that you need to be taken care of. I know that that I wanted to experience things that were age appropriate for me, but in my parents' eyes, I was still that 10-year-old little girl, even though I was living in a 30-year-old woman's body, you know? And I feel like some of the things that I wanted to experience were delayed until I gained enough confidence to push past those fears. So if I had to write a letter to myself, I would say, you only get a chance to live this life once. And I know that's kind of a cliche. It's best to do it right now, and don't worry about delaying it. Have those experiences. Go, talk to someone, go on that date, like right now, because as we've seen with so many people who have lost their lives, they didn't get the chance to delay those dreams or those desires, So yes, wherever you are as a 20 something, 30 something, 40 something, live out whatever you want for yourself, make a plan, get the community, just do it.
That is really awesome, and that's true. I think we all we're all very hesitant to take our shot, as it were, and not do what we want, and then we wait down the road and we ask ourselves, why can't we do X, Y, Z, and we play high school quarterback, as it were.
Yeah, but I know for myself, just real quick, a real specific example is, I had a desire to be a mom, and that's a normal desire for, anyone. And it's also a normal thing if you do not want to have children. That's okay. So if that's not a thing, then that's okay. But for me, it was a sincerely held desire. Now, I had doctors that flat out were like, how are you going to take care of a child? Who is going to take care of you to be able to take care of a child? I had people coming at me with all kinds of opinions of why I should not do this. And I had to really settle with, what would I have peace within my heart on the decision to become a parent or not to become a parent? And ultimately, I could not sit with myself if I did not take that shot of becoming one. And I am so glad I did. Even though I'm tired and exhausted, I don't want to look back, because that was the best decision for me, even in spite of all of those negative opinions and doubts and questions. I learned that lesson once with changing my major from engineering. I was not going to do that again with choosing to become a parent.
Do you ever regret that decision of changing, of listening to listening to doubters or naysayers and changing your major?
I did for a while. I did. And, so after I get my son, graduated from high school and, who knows, I may go back and finish that degree. I think just kind of how life happens, I still ended up getting a chance to work with incredible scientists, working on really cool ideas like machine learning, artificial intelligence, just really cool stuff. So as it were to happen, I'm still in the realm of STEM. But as far as, I don't know if the right word is, feather in my cap or whatever, I still would like to finish it. It's an expensive proposition to go back and finish it. But, that is one thing I do regret, because it was all based on speculation. And the reality is, I had all of the potential in the world to become a successful engineer. I don't know where life would have ended up if I had finished my degree in engineering, but there's nothing that would have said, by getting this degree, I would not have been successful. Everything was pointing towards I would have been successful. And I think that's the hard thing, is to take in doubts and interpret them as facts. And I think a lot of us as disabled people are faced with opinions and speculation, and it's hard to not accept those as facts about who we are as a person. And that's where it is so vitally important that we have a strong and positive view of ourselves as disabled people, because that is going to happen as we go through life.
Since obviously, have you heard of, you obviously seen the movie and heard the book of Hidden Figures, right?
Yeah.
And obviously that came out a while back, but I don't know, in your opinion, having diversity amongst the in the STEM fields, especially amongst women of color and women, period, because how about you think that like helped it out, help diversify? I guess you would say.
Yeah, I mean, Hidden Figures, I mean, I think, yeah, it was a story that was told that not very many people knew about. But there are so many more stories of women of color, people of color, people with disabilities doing amazing work that need to be told and shared. So I think yes, it has done. It was a very good thing because it did reignite that push to have programs to encourage women, people of color, people with disabilities to get into the field. The thing that I am concerned about is that we also need to address the infrastructure issues of why people may not go into those STEM fields. It may be, do they have barriers related to receiving the right kind of medical care? Do they have barriers to getting the right kind of equipment they need? Do they feel like they have the ability to make decisions for themselves? And those are kind of infrastructure, issues that need to be addressed as we also deal with the possibility of going into these really cool fields like STEM.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, that it's not just about getting awareness of more diversity in STEM. It's about addressing the issues behind the scenes so that a diverse population can get into STEM.
Yeah. I know for a number of internships, example would be is a number of internships, were, so let's say even at NASA, our field centers are, with the exception of NASA headquarters, which is in DC, and Goddard, which is in the DC area where I work, most of our field centers are, not in metropolitan areas where you have good public accessible transportation. So we had a internship program called Access, and it was through the American Association for the Advancement of Science, AAAS. And we had to deal with the issues of transportation, of accessible housing. It did no good to have internships if we didn't address those issues and support students in that way. And then as an employee community and having an employee resource group available to, one of my first questions when I got hired with NASA is, how am I going to get to work? And the person that was able to answer that was another blind person. So, being able to connect folks together was really helpful. So yeah, infrastructure needs to be tackled along with creating these opportunities.
That makes a lot of sense. So we are getting towards the end of our time. We're going to transition into Q&A pretty soon, but before we do, our last question until we get to the Q&A is, what has been your experience learning and using assistive technology, and how did that empower you or frustrate you?
Oh my goodness. So, oh my goodness, it was empowering to be able, in some way. Okay, so it happens more so virtually now that, I have, screen readers, I have a braille display, I use IRA, which is a visual interpreting service to provide, other support as I need it. And because we're in a virtual environment, most of the people that I've been working with lately have no idea that I'm blind, so that's kind of a cool thing to know, that the assistive technology that helps me be employed allows it to be kind of seamless. But I don't want that fact to be lost that I am blind, because I don't want awareness or the intentionality that goes behind making sure that our environments, our technology is accessible to be forgotten. Just as a Black woman, I don't want it to be forgotten that, hey, I'm a Black woman, and to even get into the door, there's going to be some things that I have to face beforehand. Some of the frustration that I experience now is that because technology is changing so much, and sometimes I just don't have the bandwidth to learn the new hacks and tips and tricks that I need to know to manage my assistive technology, to be able to access the new technology. So sometimes it's easy to become kind of, I don't want to say left behind, but kind of stuck in a rut with something that works, but can become outdated, because of how technology is moving and progressing. So that's a level of frustration, and it's just more to do with my bandwidth for being able to set aside that time I used to have for, addressing my technology needs.
That makes a lot of sense. I imagine that with technology constantly changing, then having to relearn assistive technology that maybe isn't changing quite as quickly or in the ways that it should be.
Well, I think that's where it is incredibly important to have accessibility embedded in the base level design.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I'm having to learn 2 or 3 different software packages to be able to just access a website or a software package, then that's just that's 3 times the more work that I have to do just to even get to step 1. So that's why, having companies and design teams that are aware and mindful and are that have disabled people on their teams from the jump is great, because being able to turn on a feature is and get accessibility right then as is the best, because that means that my accessibility is growing as the technology evolves with it.
Yeah. Well, I think we're just about ready to transition to Q&A, so I'm going to bring Tatum back on here to start that.
Hi, I'm Tatum again. And first of all, I just wanted to say thank you for this conversation. I am a blind young adult who is in her first week at grad school. So a lot of what you're saying feels really real to me right now. And a lot of the I don't know, sort of ableism and also the learning of technology and things of that nature are all really there. But I really appreciate what you're saying about community and all of that too. It was really, really powerful. So thank you for that. But I want to jump in with a couple Q&A questions. I think our first Q&A question that I want to read is, have you ever experienced imposter syndrome? So feeling I don't know how to define imposter syndrome exactly, but feeling that you don't match up to the other people in the room or whatever. when either within your field of work or even within everyday life being and specifically in terms of disability, I guess. So being like not disabled enough or not abled enough, or in terms of like your job or your life, and how have you learned to cope with those feelings and move forward?
Okay, yeah. So that has come up in a couple different ways. One with this recent assignment where I'm going out and we're reviewing universities and different entities and making sure that they are being up to our standards. We're seen as the experts in the room, and so it's kind of wild to be a part of that team. And I know I constantly kind of question, like, am I good enough? Do I know the answer? Can I lead this team, adequately? And it I kind of have to like take a moment and literally just kind of breathe before a meeting or a session to kind of steel myself to kind of quiet down even my own fears. And that's helped as a technique, to kind of settle myself. So I don't go into a meeting kind of feeling, shaky or unsure. But also, and we know I use the word blind to, label myself. But I do have remaining vision. And so I know I know it is hard for people who may have a blanket understanding of what blindness is, as in meaning totally blind, or that living a blind person's life has to look one way. Yes. And I think that I've struggled with that because, what if I go down the street and I don't have, my cane with me? Am I still blind? The answer is yes. What if, I choose to use, let's say, magnification software versus screen reader? I'm still blind. I'm using the tool that is most appropriate at the time. And it's my choice, not someone else's choice. And that gives me my power back that can often be taken away when we slide into imposter syndrome, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's huge. I love, love your answer there. I also have some remaining vision, and I question that daily. So that was a very helpful response. And I want to jump in. We're kind of going all over the place in these Q&A questions, but I want to ask this one. So from one of our former youth leads, as a Black disabled woman, how do you balance the advocacy that comes with being a member of more than one marginalized group? So kind of that intersectionality.
I think that's where I think that going back to the sense and knowing that we have like a community of care, and knowing when to be able to kind of step back, because yes, it can feel very daunting to feel like I have to take on, racial justice, especially as a mom of a Black boy. I have to take on accessibility. I have to, take on gender rights and, being a part of the LGBT community, feel like I have to do this.
Yeah. And
not to say if I took on all of that, I would be afraid to step out of my front door, So knowing that as I am able to step up and take on the charge of challenging misconceptions or fighting for accessibility, I also have the right and the grace to step back and knowing that there are other people stepping forward as they are able to. So when I need that care, I can call up, my friend Beth and say, "Woo, girl,
Yeah.
can we have a virtual happy hour?" Or, being able to ask the question that helps a friend feel seen, for who they are in their own identity. I think that's what's been really helpful, of knowing that you have the strength and the courage to step up, but also the grace and the right to step back.
Yeah, that's really huge. I love that. Thank you. And we're just going with some of these from all over the place, but that was yeah, I really appreciate just how you like kind of weave that together of the like you can have sort of both of those. Just both of those are very, very good ways of being in the world. So I love that. And this question is a Q&A question that I would love to hear your thoughts on in being in my not even first week of grad school, actually, it's next week. I just moved here. But I'm very all over the place. But how have you experienced ableism in the education system? I think you talked a little bit about that probably. But then also, what advice would you give to people not receiving the accommodations that they need? Which may or may not be a question that I am asking myself right now too. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Ooh. Okay, so definitely there are like resources, disabled student services, that are, exist on most campuses. And sometimes, honestly, I while the disabled student services was well-meaning, sometimes it created more barriers to getting, the accommodations that I needed, and so honestly, sometimes the approach of sitting down with a professor or sitting down with, the chair of the department and saying, "Hey, here is what I need," and using my own voice to ask for those was more helpful. But in those instances where I needed the help, that's where having the mentors and especially disabled mentors as like sounding boards was really helpful, so that I could kind of craft my request or message in a way that it could be heard. Because believe me, it can get emotional when you are exhausted and tired and you're frustrated and you're angry. Why is this not happening? But you still have to have that kind of level of suaveness to navigate, especially in the, the hierarchy of academia. There are so many games that get played in academia when it comes to, who's your, advisor and who's this and who's that. And you have to have somebody that can kind of help lay that out for you,
Yeah,
and use as a sounding board. It's been some time since I've been in grad school, but that's what I would say.
That's very helpful. I love that. And I think, think that's a very relevant question to a lot of youth probably on this call. And I think we have a couple more from the chat. Let me pull this one up. Okay, so I'll ask this in the particularity that they sent it, and then we can maybe take it more broadly if you want to. It says, have you heard of Mission Astro Access? If so, how might we... Yes, cool. Okay, then we don't even need to, I was gonna say, if you haven't, we can take it more broad, but if so, how might we leverage that program to increase STEM involvement for people with disabilities? So also maybe just in general, how can we increase involvement in STEM of people with disabilities? But for that particular person with that particular community. Yeah.
Okay, so for those that may not know, Mission Astro Access is a community of people with disabilities who are trying to kind of introduce and actually test the idea of disabled people with disabilities as crew members in flight. We have all these rich people that are fighting to get up to space. Why can't disabled people do that? Be a part of that too. So, so I think they have their test flight is a flight using parabolas to simulate weightlessness, and that's a common tool that's used. And I wish, I'm going to take off my federal employee, NASA badge, off. I wish NASA was in that place to do that, to be at the frontier of that. But with having Astro Access there in the front doing it, I'm like, hey, let's do it, Yeah. I would want to submit my own application to be there. But I think it's a great step forward. There actually are some other space agencies. I think the European Space Agency is actually looking at their astronaut requirements and really reimagining what requirements are they really that are really necessary, because a lot of people view astronauts as being like superhuman, or being the range of who fits in that category is very slim or very small. And is that realistic? Especially as commercial space flight is, taking off. So I am all about it. So I am excited they're doing it. I'd like to see more work being done in that area to kind of open up the field for a space flight.
That's so cool. I love that. That's amazing. That would be absolutely incredible. And along with that, there was one question in here about like if you've done any like disability advocacy work within NASA, which I think you kind of touched on there, but like have you particularly like done any of that? If there's
So actually for oh my goodness, almost 10 years I was the center's disability program manager at Goddard Space Flight Center. So when I was the program manager, I managed our recruitment efforts for bringing in students and employees through programs like the Workforce Recruitment Program, or WRP. We revamped our reasonable accommodations process, so that it wasn't so onerous on the individual with a disability requesting the accommodation, that it kind of lessened the bureaucratic burden that was in place. We oh my goodness, we did a lot of stuff. We stood up our employee resource group. And we also provided, we set up a centralized accommodation fund, so that if an employee needed an accommodation, they did not have to worry about their accommodation hitting their organization financially, that there was funding set aside, so that individuals who are working in smaller organizations or smaller projects would have the same access to an accommodation as anyone else. So yeah, I've done it. I wanted to take a step away from that career-wise, to kind of explore my own interests. And again, that's where being able to have conversations with mentors to say, where do I want to go in my career? And them looking out for me to say, hey, Dina, have you thought about this? And kind of setting the stage for being able to set up interviews for other opportunities. So it definitely is really cool to work in the disability field, just as much as it's really cool to work outside of it as well.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love that you're able to like pair like that work inside disability advocacy stuff with just like regular life and like the job that you want in your career. Like that's really awesome. And I think it is so like relevant to, I always tell people it's like so relevant to every aspect of like people's workplace, disability justice. And so I think that's really awesome. I love that. Okay, and I think we have continue updating questions in the chat if you want to, but we have a few more minutes, and so I'm going to ask maybe our last one, or maybe we'll get one more while I'm asking this. But what experience? So you said that you had a guide dog at one point, and maybe now. What experience do you have with a guide dog, and is there anything that you want? Like, is there anything that you wish more people knew about having a guide dog?
Oh my goodness. So so I have a snoring guide dog on the
Cool.
couch next to me. She is a 9.5-year-old black lab from the Seeing Eye. She is my third guide dog. So actually I got my first guide dog when I was a sophomore in college. It took a year for me to muster up enough courage to submit the application because my parents did not want me to get a guide dog. That goes back to not delaying things that you want. So I think I delayed a year or more because I was afraid of what my parents thought. But anyways, so it was being a college student, it was a great time to get a guide dog or service dog because it was my first taste of independence. But having a guide dog or a service dog is a level of responsibility in that you have this living being that depends on you for their care. And it also, just the realities, you are going to have to be confident in setting boundaries for yourself and for your guide. People are going to want to pet your dog, pet your service dog, engage with your service dog instead of you. I know for a while I struggled with, are people wanting to talk to me because of me or because of my dog? You know,
Oh yeah,
because I seem like I'm
Feel
just
that.
attached to my dog, you know. And so that definitely kind of messes with your, confidence at times. But what I'm finding now is that, as I'm in the employment field and as a mom, having a guide dog is definitely a good thing. Probably just where I am in life, chasing after a toddler. After, she retires, I may take a break from using a guide dog as my primary means of mobility. Because it's a responsibility. And right now it just may be a bit too much. And that is okay. That is my choice as a person, who chooses their mobility tool.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it is great having a dog, I certainly have had unique experiences because of having a dog. But I think the bottom line is really assessing your comfort level with engaging the public, both positive and also in tough situations when it comes to access. We don't want those things to happen, but they do.
Yeah, definitely. So we got a couple more questions in the chat since since I said that. So yay, thank you all. One of the questions is that I think would be interesting to talk about is how do we muster up the courage to talk about our disability if it is not a visible one? And I think that's particularly interesting, as you were saying, because on Zoom, people can't necessarily like tell that we're blind. And so I have also gone from being very visibly disabled to being not very visibly disabled. So maybe talk a little bit about that and how like this person said, how can we muster up the courage to kind of talk about it?
Yeah. And I think it's important to assess, what do you gain from being able to be authentic, with sharing who you are, because it takes a lot of energy, a lot of worry to hold up an image of who you are not. I know that if sharing so I also deal with endometriosis, which can be very, painful at times. And I know it caused me to either have to go use the restroom or not want to walk very far at times or whatever. And I know when there were times where I needed to, address my needs associated with having endometriosis, and I didn't. It caused more problems later on because I ignored that aspect of who I was. But what I gained when I was able to push past that was opening the door to conversations with people who are also dealing with invisible disabilities or not apparent disabilities, and opening up a level of flexibility for other people who are also afraid to step up as well. And it took away that extra unnecessary burden of holding up an image that I didn't need to carry anymore, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think there is that there's that like challenge of it, but also that like easing of the burden that comes with just being like, I don't know, honest about like that part of your life.
Yeah. And you there may be times where when you read a situation, you're like, there's no need to bring it up, Yep. Or you may read a situation and say, yeah, this is something, if I'm going to be dealing with this person long term, or the need is apparent, yes, we need to have this conversation, or they need to know, and that's totally, that's a skill that you get over time, and knowing which is which.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, 2 more maybe quick ones, and then we will be done. But second to last question is for someone in the chat. They asked, and we'll kind of pair a couple together, but were you involved in space camp? And are there any opportunities for disabled youth to be involved in space camp or any other sort of space-oriented thing?
Yeah. So yes, we had so there's space camps that I think were based out of either Kennedy as well as in Alabama. Those are run by private entities, so I was not involved in those. But our internships that we had for students, and we still have for students, yes, I've definitely been a part of that, whether it was recruiting, interviewing students, and then also matching them with, we call them mentors, but they're basically your supervisors for the summers. So right now, NASA has been using a kind of one-stop portal. I believe it's ossi.nasa.gov for being able to look at internships that are available continuously all through the year. But honestly, sometimes the way that I've connected students with internship opportunities, 2 ways. One of them is through the disability program manager, who is, usually involved in conversations related to hiring or either upcoming hiring opportunities, but also the Schedule A coordinator. Schedule A is a federal tool for agencies to be able to hire people with disabilities non-competitively. A lot of agencies are also using pathway internships, and you can view those on usajobs.gov. So that there's a number of different paths to be able to take to get an internship and or employment opportunity with NASA. And it's not just STEM fields. We hire all different kinds of folks, communication folks, visual arts, accounting, economics, pretty much anything you can think of. There are opportunities out there.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Thank you for just sharing all that. That was really helpful. And our very last question is, let me grab it here. What advice would you give to disabled youth about getting involved in disability advocacy? And like, you mentioned kind of ways that we can get involved in like sort of the like space aspect of what you do, but what if people are wanting to get involved in the like disability advocacy movement?
Oh my goodness. Yes, so definitely I would say reaching out to your state's or local independent living center. There's usually a lot of disability advocacy done out of those, the ILCs, as well as whether it's the state or government's governor's commission on people with disabilities. They, I believe, usually will have they used to be called youth leadership forums. I don't know if that's the same kind of name.
Yeah, I think it is still, maybe.
So
yes.
Each state would have either state or regional level conferences. So that's honestly, that's how I got involved, was
Awesome.
attending a Arkansas Youth Leadership Forum. And then and that's how I learned about the Youth Advisory Committee. So when
Cool.
Rebecca Coakley and Christina and I were younger, we served on those advisory committees as youth.
Wow.
And then, you know, look at
Cool.
those individuals.
Yeah, I'm like, that's an incredible, incredible team.
Some badasses, so.
Yeah, that's,
you know,
love it.
and you definitely, you know, each disability kind of has its own, you know, internal advocacy. So the blind community has its own advocacy, you know, the autism community, the, you know, deaf community. You kind of have to, you know, figure out what works for where you are in the moment. But just knowing that whatever work that you do, that you're going in with good intentions of helping yourself and with others.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. And I just, again, really appreciate all of your answers here. It was absolutely lovely getting to talk with you. And I think we're gonna pop Cami back in and cue up the PowerPoint slide, hopefully, to kind of introduce our next month's thing. But I just, thank you so much for everything you said here. And I am just super grateful that you were here tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you so much, Dina. It was wonderful to have you. And we will be reaching out to you about getting you a t-shirt. And we did talk a little bit about how youth can get involved, other ways that you can get involved with the Yo Disabled and Proud project specifically. You can follow us on social media on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. We are at Yo Disabled and Proud, as well as hashtag Yo Disabled Leadership. And in about a month from now, we have our next installment of the speaker series with Haben Girma, who is the first deafblind woman to graduate from Harvard Law. And we are so excited to interview her on September 21st from 6 to 7 p.m. We have a link here that you can use to sign up, and I believe that will get thrown in the chat as well. Thank you all so much for coming. When you close out the Zoom, a SurveyMonkey will come up with a survey about tonight's event. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.